Master Aldric Voss keeps vigil in his stone tower overlooking the endless Atlantic, surrounded by a lifetime's collection of maps and the tools of his cartographic craft. The tower stands like a weathered finger pointing toward heaven, its granite blocks worn smooth by centuries of salt spray and Atlantic gales that carry whispers from waters no chart has ever bounded. Here, where the known world dissolves into legend and the imagination of terrified sailors, Master Aldric Voss maintains his solitary watch over parchments that document the expansion of human knowledge across oceans that resist measurement. At 72 years, his body has grown frail as autumn leaves, yet his mind remains sharp as the compass points that guide ships through darkness more complete than any terrestrial night. The workshop breathes with accumulated wisdom, its stone walls lined with charts that speak of voyages undertaken when the world seemed smaller and the seas held fewer terrors. Brass instruments gleam in lamplight that pushes back against shadows thick as ship's tar, while quills rest in silver holders beside inkwells whose contents flow black as the depths beyond the continental shelf. The scent of vellum mingles with whale oil and the salt air that seeps through window frames, creating an atmosphere heavy with the weight of knowledge gathered at the cost of lives that sleep beneath waters no Christian burial has ever blessed. Aldric's hands, permanently stained with ink, work by lanternlight to preserve cartographic knowledge as the last royal cartographer of a dying tradition. His hands move across the parchment with movements that have grown deliberate through decades of practice, fingers permanently stained with ink that seems to flow from his very bones onto maps that chart territories where dragons might indeed dwell beyond the margins of human understanding. The title of royal cartographer carries little weight in these diminished times, when kings prefer the counsel of merchants to that of men who measure mystery in leagues and fathoms. Yet Aldric continues his work with the devotion of a monk copying scripture, understanding that each line drawn represents knowledge that will die with him unless preserved in forms that might survive the coming darkness. The lantern flame flickers against glass that has grown yellow with age, casting shadows that dance across charts whose coastlines tell stories of courage and catastrophe in equal measure. Here lies the outline of islands where expeditions have vanished without trace. There, the careful notation of depths that no sounding line has touched, while beyond the edge of accurate knowledge, speculation rendered in tentative strokes suggests lands that may exist only in the fevered imagination of sailors driven mad by too many nights beneath stars that shine in patterns unknown to terrestrial observation. Aldric recalls the sailors and explorers who brought him fragments of impossible knowledge from voyages beyond the mapped world. Memory carries him backward through decades of accumulated encounters with men whose eyes held depths that normal experience could not create. Mariners who spoke in whispers of phenomena that challenged every assumption about the world's structure and divine plan. Captain Morgrim Blackwater had possessed charts drawn on materials that resembled parchment, yet felt cold as winter stone beneath trembling fingers, their symbols arranged in patterns that suggested mathematical relationships too complex for human minds trained in earthly geometry. The old Viking's voice had carried traces of languages never heard in Christian lands when he described waters where compass needles spun without purpose and stars moved in configurations that made navigation dependent upon instincts older than civilization. Others had come bearing fragments of knowledge that fitted together like pieces of a vast puzzle whose completed image remained hidden behind veils of impossibility and fear. A Portuguese navigator had brought sketches of sea creatures whose size exceeded the bounds of natural law, while a Venetian merchant had whispered of ports where the architecture defied gravity, and the inhabitants possessed knowledge that made human learning appear as primitive as a child's first attempts at letters. Each visitor had left traces of wonder and terror that accumulated in Aldric's mind like sediment deposited by tides that brought treasures from depths beyond measurement. Aldric remembers the impossible night 40 years ago when the sky split open and revealed colors that possessed no earthly names. 40 years have passed since the night when heaven forgot its ordained position and revealed glimpses of realms that exist beyond the sphere of fixed stars. Yet the memory burns with clarity that makes time collapse into immediacy. The sky had opened like parchment torn by divine fingers, displaying colors that possessed no names in any language that mortal tongues could pronounce, while the ocean beneath reflected illumination that seemed to emerge from its own depths rather than descend from celestial heights. The crew of the merchant vessel St. Brendan's Hope had stood transfixed by beauty and terror that exceeded human capacity for comprehension, their voices reduced to whispered prayers in languages that predated Christianity's arrival in northern waters. When dawn restored familiar appearance to both sky and sea, 3 men had vanished without leaving trace of their departure, while the survivors bore witness to phenomena that rational minds rejected, despite evidence that lingered in their dreams for years afterward. The ship's compass had refused to point true north for a fortnight following that impossible night, while the chronometer had gained time according to measurements that suggested hours had passed more slowly than divine law permitted within the natural order that governed celestial mechanics. Aldric alone among the witnesses had possessed sufficient education to recognize that they had encountered something that existed outside the boundaries of creation, as theologians understood divine architecture. Alone in his tower, Aldric grapples with the weight of preserving knowledge too dangerous to share, yet too important to let perish with him. Solitude has become his closest companion through years when kings have ceased to value wisdom that cannot be converted into gold or used to justify territorial expansion through conventional warfare. The tower's isolation serves purposes beyond mere geographic convenience, providing sanctuary where dangerous knowledge can be preserved without contaminating minds unprepared for truths that challenge fundamental assumptions about reality's structure and divine purpose. Each night brings the ritual of recording observations that accumulate despite official prohibition against exploration of waters beyond established trade routes, where commerce provides adequate justification for governmental support of maritime ventures. The burden of unique knowledge weighs heavily upon shoulders that were never meant to bear such responsibility alone, yet circumstances have conspired to make him the sole repository of information that connects fragmentary reports into patterns that suggest cosmic truths too vast for individual comprehension. His private correspondence with scholars throughout Europe has dwindled as colleagues abandon speculative investigation in favor of studies that promise immediate practical application or religious orthodoxy that requires no dangerous questions about divine creation's true scope and magnificent complexity. The maps that surround him tonight represent humanity's accumulated understanding of world whose boundaries expand through courage while revealing mysteries that grow deeper rather than clearer with each new discovery. Aldric works on his greatest and most impossible project, charting the place where the known world ends and something else begins. Before him lies the map that has consumed the final decades of his life, a chart that attempts to document the boundary between the world of human experience and realms that exist beyond cartographic possibility. The edge, as he has come to call it, represents more than mere geographic frontier. It embodies the limit of human understanding itself, the place where scientific observation yields to speculation that borders upon heresy according to theological authorities who prefer creation to remain safely contained within scriptural boundaries. Each mark upon this forbidden parchment has been placed according to evidence gathered from sources whose reliability cannot be verified through conventional means, yet whose consistency across multiple independent reports suggests underlying truth that defies comfortable explanation. The symbols that crowd the map's margins originated in logbooks whose authors disappeared during voyages that official records deny ever occurred, their observations preserved only through copies made by hands that recognized their significance, despite inability to comprehend their full implications. Here lies notation of waters where depths cannot be sounded. There the careful placement of islands that appear and vanish according to lunar cycles that connect terrestrial geography to celestial mechanics through relationships that existing astronomical knowledge cannot adequately explain. The work proceeds slowly, hampered by the necessity of cross-referencing accounts that were never intended for scholarly analysis. Yet patterns emerge that suggest systematic rather than random phenomena operating beyond the boundaries of mapped territory. As night deepens around his tower, Aldric senses something stirring in the distant ocean that may finally validate his lifetime's work. Tonight carries atmospheric weight that distinguishes it from the countless other nights when he has labored in solitude, the air itself seeming charged with potential energy that makes the tower's stones hum with frequencies barely perceptible to human senses yet unmistakably present to consciousness, trained through decades of attention to subtle variations in environmental conditions. The wind that presses against ancient glass carries voices that might originate from distant storm systems, or phenomena that operate according to principles unknown to terrestrial meteorology. While the ocean beyond reflects no light, despite clear skies that should permit stellar illumination to penetrate atmospheric conditions that appear optimal for celestial observation. His instruments register variations that fall within normal margins, yet combine to create patterns that experienced judgment recognizes as significant, despite inability to interpret their meaning through reference to established knowledge about natural law and divine order. The compass needle wavers with frequency that affects precision while remaining within tolerances that permit navigation. Yet its behavior suggests influences that operate beyond magnetic fields, generated by planetary rotation according to principles that natural philosophy has documented through centuries of careful measurement. And in the distance, something shifts, as if the horizon itself had begun to breathe. The ocean beyond the tower begins to pulse with unnatural rhythm, while Aldric's instruments register impossible readings. The sea itself seems to acknowledge his decades of patient observation. The phenomenon manifests first as subtle variation in wave patterns that defies meteorological explanation. The Atlantic's surface rising and falling with rhythm too regular for natural tidal forces, yet too vast for human engineering to influence across such distances. Aldric presses weathered palms against the tower's stone sill, feeling vibration that travels through granite foundations into his bones like the heartbeat of something immeasurably ancient, awakening from sleep that has lasted longer than human memory can encompass. The brass chronometer upon his desk ticks with irregularity that suggests temporal distortion affecting mechanical precision, its pendulum swinging according to gravitational influences that operate beyond terrestrial physics. Through the telescope that has served him faithfully for 3 decades, he observes water that moves with purpose rather than responding to wind patterns that should govern surface behavior according to principles established through centuries of nautical observation. The phosphorescence that sometimes illuminates northern waters appears tonight as geometric forms that pulse beneath the waves, creating patterns too complex for random biological activity, yet too organized for any natural phenomenon documented within existing natural philosophy. His logbook lies open before him, yet the entries he attempts to record emerge in symbols that his conscious mind does not recognize, as if some deeper knowledge were expressing itself through hands trained in cartographic precision, but guided by understanding that transcends human education. Aldric's navigational instruments begin behaving according to laws that contradict centuries of magnetic observation. The compass needle points toward coordinates that should not exist on any earthly map. The compass that has guided countless vessels through safe passages now spins with deliberation that suggests conscious choice rather than magnetic confusion, its needle describing arcs that correspond to no known gravitational or electromagnetic field, yet maintaining consistency that indicates underlying order operating through principles unknown to natural philosophy. Each revolution traces patterns that align with symbols marked upon his most secret charts. Those maps compiled from fragments of impossible knowledge gathered from mariners who had sailed beyond the boundaries of charted waters and returned with eyes that held depths no earthly ocean could create. The astrolabe suspended beside his workbench registers stellar positions that contradict astronomical observations recorded by learned men throughout Europe. Its brass disc rotating to indicate constellations that occupy regions of sky where no stars should shine according to celestial mechanics established through mathematical analysis spanning generations of scholarly investigation. Yet the instrument's behavior displays precision that suggests accurate measurement of phenomena that exist beyond current understanding of divine creation's architecture. Recording data that challenges fundamental assumptions about reality's structure, while providing information too consistent for dismissal as mechanical failure or observational error. Wind carries sounds that resemble distant music played upon instruments unknown to terrestrial craftsmen, melodies that seem to emerge from the ocean's depths, rather than descend from atmospheric currents that should govern acoustic transmission according to established principles of natural law. The haunting harmonies speak in mathematical relationships that his trained ear recognizes as purposeful composition despite inability to identify their source or comprehend their meaning through reference to musical traditions developed within Christian civilization's cultural boundaries. Ancient charts in Aldric's collection begin revealing hidden details, as if responding to the ocean's strange awakening. Maps transform before his eyes, showing coastlines that should not exist. The vellum charts that line his workshop walls seem to breathe with life that parchment should not possess, their surfaces rippling with movement that reveals details previously invisible despite decades of careful study and meticulous cataloging. Coastlines drawn in fading ink begin extending themselves across blank margins, creating geographical features that correspond to no known landmasses, yet display cartographic accuracy that suggests direct observation rather than artistic imagination. The transformation proceeds slowly enough that conscious attention might dismiss it as optical illusion created by flickering lamplight, yet systematic enough that careful observation confirms actual modification of materials that should remain stable according to natural law governing inanimate substances. Symbols that had appeared meaningless when first copied from sources whose reliability remained questionable now arrange themselves into patterns that suggest linguistic structure, hieroglyphic communications that convey meaning through visual relationships, too complex for accidental formation, yet too alien for translation through conventional methods developed for deciphering human languages. The cryptic notations pulse with luminescence that owes nothing to external illumination, their golden glow emanating from ink that should possess no capacity for generating light according to chemical principles that govern combustible and phosphorescent materials within terrestrial environments. His most precious possession, The chart fragment recovered from the wreckage of a Venetian galley found drifting empty beyond the Pillars of Hercules begins revealing layers of information that had remained hidden beneath its surface appearance. The parchment, crafted from materials that resembled animal hide, yet possessed properties unknown to any creature documented within natural history, displays depth that allows multiple images to occupy the same space through dimensional relationships that challenge geometric understanding developed through Euclidean principles. As he watches in fascination mixed with growing dread, the map shows him waters that exist in the same coordinates as familiar shipping lanes, yet possess characteristics that suggest entirely different oceanic conditions operating according to laws that contradict every established principle of maritime geography. The night sky above the tower displays stellar configurations impossible according to astronomical knowledge. Aldric realizes the heavens themselves are shifting to reveal hidden cosmic architecture. The constellation patterns that have guided navigators since ancient times begin shifting with movement too gradual for casual observation, yet too systematic for natural stellar motion that operates according to celestial mechanics requiring millennia for noticeable displacement. Polaris, the eternal constant that has served as humanity's northern beacon throughout recorded history, flickers with uncertainty that makes navigation dependent upon magnetic compass readings that themselves have become unreliable according to measurements that contradict decades of careful observation. The phenomenon suggests cosmic forces operating beyond gravitational influences that should govern stellar positions according to mathematical principles established through astronomical calculations, spanning centuries of scholarly investigation. Through his largest telescope, an instrument crafted by the finest lensmakers in Amsterdam and capable of revealing celestial details invisible to naked eye observation, Aldric observes stars that occupy positions where previous nights had shown only empty void despite atmospheric conditions optimal for stellar visibility. The new luminaries display colors that possess no names within terrestrial language. Their light-carrying qualities that affect human consciousness in ways that normal starlight does not influence, according to physiological responses documented through natural philosophy's study of sensory perception and neurological function. The moon itself appears altered, its familiar surface features rearranged into patterns that suggest artificial modification rather than natural geological processes that should govern lunar topography according to principles that apply to all celestial bodies within divine creation's ordered structure. Crater formations spell out symbols that correspond to notations appearing upon his most secret charts, creating connections between terrestrial cartography and cosmic phenomena through relationships that indicate systematic, rather than coincidental correspondence between oceanic mysteries and celestial abnormalities that challenge every assumption about reality's fundamental nature. Aldric begins to understand that his life's work mapping the impossible has been preparation for this moment when the edge of the world reveals its true nature. The boundary between dimensions grows thin. Understanding dawns with terrible clarity that his decades of patient labor have served purposes beyond mere scholarly curiosity or royal commission. That every map drawn and every coordinate recorded has contributed to preparation for encounter with forces that operate beyond human comprehension, yet require human consciousness for their earthly manifestation. The fragments of impossible knowledge gathered from mariners who had sailed beyond charted waters begin assembling themselves into a coherent picture that reveals the edge not as geographical boundary, but as dimensional threshold, where realities intersect according to principles that exist outside natural law governing terrestrial phenomena. The tower itself has been positioned with precision that suggests deliberate choice rather than convenient isolation, its location corresponding to coordinates that appear upon charts whose origins predate human settlement, of these northern coastlands by periods that extend beyond historical record. The granite blocks that form its foundation bear inscriptions carved in languages that possess no connection to known human writing systems, their symbols matching notations that appear upon the most ancient maps in his collection. Documents acquired from sources whose knowledge exceeded any earthly educational institution's capacity for instruction. His life's obsession with charting impossible waters has prepared consciousness for recognition of truths that untrained minds would reject as madness or heresy. Education, in mysteries that operate beyond theological doctrine's ability to encompass within orthodox understanding of divine creation's scope and magnificent complexity. Each night spent in solitary study has refined perception necessary for detecting phenomena that exist at the boundaries of human experience, developing sensitivity required for communication with intelligence that operates through means unknown to earthly philosophy, yet accessible to minds willing to abandon comfortable assumptions about reality's limitations. All of Aldric's instruments and maps point toward a specific location where the edge of the world is manifestating. The ocean begins forming patterns that mirror his cartographic work. The coordinates that emerge from his calculations describe position that exists simultaneously within familiar Atlantic waters and beyond any ocean that earthly geography should contain. Dimensional intersection, where multiple realities occupy identical space through mathematical relationships that transcend three-dimensional limitations imposed upon human perception by physiological constraints governing normal sensory experience. Every instrument confirms the same impossible location despite mechanical principles that should prevent such unanimous agreement among devices operating according to different natural laws governing magnetic, gravitational, and optical phenomena. The ocean itself begins forming patterns that mirror cartographic projections contained within his most secret charts. Water arranging itself into configurations that correspond to coastlines and depth measurements recorded through observations that rational analysis had dismissed as impossible, despite their internal consistency and systematic accuracy. Currents flow in directions that contradict prevailing wind patterns while maintaining velocities that create geometric forms visible from his elevated observation position. Temporary geography that exists only long enough for consciousness to register its significance before dissolving back into normal wave action that provides no evidence of previous organization. Phosphorescent displays beneath the surface create illuminated maps that show oceanic features extending far beyond any continental shelf that geological survey has documented. Underwater mountain ranges and abyssal trenches that stretch toward horizons where no land should exist, according to terrestrial planets' known dimensions. The luminous charts pulse with rhythm that synchronizes with his heartbeat, creating biological connection between human observer and cosmic phenomena that operate through mechanisms unknown to medical understanding of physiological function and neurological response patterns. The climactic moment arrives as the sea itself becomes conscious, revealing that Aldric's tower stands at the focal point where dimensional boundaries converge. Reality begins shifting toward impossible revelation. The transformation begins as subtle alteration in water's reflective properties that makes ocean surface function as mirror showing not sky above, but depths below that extend far beyond any earthly seafloor, revealing underwater landscapes that possess architectural features suggesting intelligent construction according to geometric principles unknown to human engineering, yet displaying aesthetic sensibilities that consciousness trained in mathematical beauty can recognize as purposeful design. The reflected images show cities whose spires reach upward toward surface waters that serve as sky for civilizations that exist within oceanic depths, that normal measurement cannot penetrate despite technological advancement that has enabled exploration of terrestrial geography. Waves that approach the rocky coastline beneath his tower carry sounds that resolve into languages that possess grammatical structures too complex for human vocal apparatus to reproduce, yet sufficiently systematic for trained linguistic analysis to recognize as genuine communication, rather than random acoustic phenomena generated through natural processes governing fluid dynamics and atmospheric pressure. The voices speak of knowledge that encompasses human understanding while extending beyond terrestrial limitations into cosmic territories where consciousness operates according to principles that transcend biological constraints governing earthly intelligence and awareness patterns. The horizon itself begins displaying curvature that contradicts planetary dimensions established through mathematical calculation and navigational observation, suggesting that oceanic boundaries extend beyond spherical geometry into dimensional configurations that allow infinite expansion within finite space through topological relationships that challenge every assumption about reality's structural foundations. And as midnight approaches with weight that makes time itself seem malleable, the ocean opens eyes vast as continents to gaze upon the cartographer who has spent his life preparing for this moment when the edge of the world finally reveals its true face. The ocean's immense consciousness reaches across dimensional boundaries to establish contact with Aldric. Ancient knowledge flows between them through methods that transcend human language and earthly communication. The first touch arrives not as sound or vision, but as direct transmission of understanding that bypasses sensory organs entirely. Knowledge flowing from oceanic intelligence into consciousness, prepared through decades of patient study to receive information too vast for normal human cognition, to process without structural damage to psychological foundations. Aldric feels his awareness expand beyond the confines of individual identity as cosmic memory floods through neural pathways that were never designed to accommodate such magnitude of accumulated experience spanning geological epochs when continents were young and stars burned with different fire. The communication reveals that his lifelong obsession with charting impossible waters had been guided by influences operating beyond conscious recognition. That every map drawn and every coordinate recorded had served to create resonance between human consciousness and intelligence that existed within dimensional territories, where oceanic depths connected to cosmic spaces through gravitational relationships unknown to terrestrial physics. His tower had been positioned not through geographical convenience, but according to calculations that required understanding of forces that operated beyond normal electromagnetic and gravitational fields governing planetary behavior. Through mental connection that operated without requiring linguistic translation, the oceanic presence conveys information about reality's true architecture, revealing that physical universe represents only surface manifestation of deeper dimensional structures where consciousness itself serves as fundamental force, governing space and time according to principles that transcend mathematical analysis developed through human scientific investigation. The knowledge carries weight that threatens to overwhelm individual identity. Yet Aldric's preparation through solitary study has developed capacity for accepting truths that exceed comfortable boundaries of human understanding. Aldric discovers that his stone tower is actually an ancient mechanism designed to facilitate dimensional convergence. The granite blocks begin humming with power that has waited centuries for activation. The realization emerges gradually that granite blocks comprising the tower's foundation contain crystalline structures that function as focusing elements for forces that operate beyond normal electromagnetic spectrum. Their mineral composition, selected through knowledge that predated human settlement of northern coastlands, by periods extending beyond historical documentation. Inscriptions carved within internal surfaces begin glowing with luminescence that reveals their true nature as operational instructions for machinery whose purpose encompasses Dimensional manipulation through gravitational field modification, according to principles that exceed current understanding of space-time relationships governing physical reality. The tower itself begins resonating with frequencies that make stone sing in harmonics, that connect terrestrial architecture to cosmic phenomena operating throughout galactic distances, where intelligence communicates through gravitational waves that carry information across interstellar voids, without requiring electromagnetic transmission methods, limited by speed of light constraints governing normal energy propagation. Each level of the structure activates in sequence, as oceanic consciousness provides triggering signals that awaken systems dormant since construction, completed by builders whose knowledge encompassed cosmic engineering techniques, unknown to any earthly civilization documented within archaeological record. Aldric feels vibration traveling through his bones as the tower transforms from passive observatory into active instrument designed to facilitate communication between dimensional territories, where different forms of consciousness operate according to laws that govern intelligence itself, rather than merely biological expressions of awareness limited by neural constraints affecting human cognitive capacity. The transformation proceeds according to architectural plan that reveals purpose extending far beyond simple geographic elevation for cartographic observation, encompassing functions that connect terrestrial location to cosmic coordinates where dimensional boundaries intersect according to mathematical relationships that determine reality's fundamental structure. Aldric's maps transform into active portals showing real-time views of impossible locations. The charts become windows into dimensional territories that exist beyond earthly geography. The vellum surfaces that had served as static repositories for cartographic information begin functioning as transparent barriers between dimensional territories. Their previously flat surfaces developing depth that allows observation of locations that exist beyond normal spatial relationships governing terrestrial geography. Through the transformed charts, Aldric observes cities whose architecture defies gravitational laws, while displaying aesthetic sensibilities that consciousness trained in mathematical beauty recognizes as purposeful design serving functions that transcend mere shelter or commerce to encompass spiritual purposes unknown to earthly civilization's cultural development. Each map displays real-time activity within territories that operate according to physical laws governing matter and energy relationships different from those constraining earthly phenomena, yet sufficiently similar to human experience that observation provides meaningful information about alternative forms of existence that consciousness might assume under different dimensional conditions. The inhabitants of these impossible realms move with purpose that suggests technological sophistication exceeding human achievement, while maintaining biological forms that indicate evolutionary development occurring within environmental conditions that favor intelligence over mere survival according to selective pressures unknown within terrestrial ecosystems. The transformation of his cartographic collection creates Observatory that encompasses cosmic territories extending far beyond any distance that earthly travel could achieve, even with technological advancement spanning centuries of scientific progress, revealing that space itself possesses structure permitting instantaneous transit between locations separated by distances that should require eons for traversal at velocities limited by physical constraints governing energy and matter relationships. Through these living maps, he witnesses phenomena that demonstrate consciousness operating as fundamental force capable of manipulating dimensional boundaries through, will focused according to principles that unite individual awareness with cosmic intelligence governing universal development. The night sky above rearranges itself to form symbols and equations that match Aldric's charts exactly. The heavens themselves become a cosmic text revealing the mathematical nature of reality. Above the tower, stellar positions continue shifting with movement that accelerates beyond gradual displacement into active reconfiguration that creates patterns corresponding precisely to symbols contained within his most secret charts. Transforming night sky into vast manuscript written in luminous script that spans distances measured in light years, yet remains comprehensible to consciousness, prepared through lifetime study of relationships between terrestrial and celestial phenomena. The cosmic text reveals mathematical equations that govern dimensional intersection through gravitational manipulation, according to principles that connect individual awareness to universal intelligence operating throughout galactic distances, where consciousness serves as organizing force for matter and energy relationships. Constellations form geometric figures that correspond to architectural diagrams contained within charts, describing impossible cities observed through transformed maps, creating direct correlation between terrestrial cartography and cosmic phenomena that demonstrates systematic rather than coincidental relationship between oceanic mysteries and stellar behavior patterns. The night sky functions as vast computational device, displaying calculations that determine optimal conditions for dimensional convergence, its stellar components adjusting positions according to mathematical requirements that ensure successful completion of processes initiated through oceanic consciousness, operating in cooperation with terrestrial intelligence. Through his largest telescope, Aldric observes stellar formations, spelling out coordinates that describe locations existing simultaneously within earthly Atlantic waters and cosmic territories, where different physical laws govern matter behavior according to principles that allow infinite expansion within finite space through topological relationships, transcending three-dimensional limitations imposed upon normal human perception. The Celestial Manuscript provides operational instructions for consciousness prepared to accept transition between dimensional territories, offering guidance for awareness willing to abandon comfortable assumptions about reality's limitations in exchange for participation in cosmic development, spanning scales that exceed individual comprehension yet remain accessible through prepared consciousness. Aldric finally understands why he was chosen for this role, and why his life has been spent in preparation for this cosmic convergence. His consciousness begins expanding beyond human limitations. Understanding crystallizes with intensity that makes previous knowledge appear fragmentary despite decades of patient accumulation, revealing that his selection as witness to dimensional convergence had occurred through processes operating beyond conscious recognition since childhood, when unusual aptitude for mathematical relationships first manifested through cartographic interests that exceeded normal educational development. Every choice that had led to his isolation within the tower had been guided by influences that operated through unconscious recognition of purposes serving cosmic development, requiring human consciousness prepared through specific forms of training unavailable through conventional educational institutions. His unique capacity for accepting impossible information without psychological collapse had been developed through gradual exposure to mysteries that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality's structure, while providing sufficient evidence to prevent dismissal as mere imagination or scholarly speculation divorced from experiential foundation. The solitude that had separated him from social interaction had been necessary for consciousness development that required freedom from collective belief systems that might inhibit individual capacity for recognizing truths that transcended cultural limitations, governing human understanding within technological civilization. The oceanic intelligence conveys appreciation for dedication that had sustained solitary study despite lack of external validation or professional recognition. Acknowledging that human consciousness, prepared through such discipline, becomes capable of serving as bridge between dimensional territories where different forms of intelligence communicate through methods unknown to normal biological awareness, yet accessible to consciousness, trained through mathematical contemplation and spiritual discipline that unites individual will with cosmic purposes. His transformation from human observer into dimensional participant begins with awareness expansion that encompasses territories extending far beyond individual identity, while maintaining core personality structure necessary for conscious choice regarding cosmic involvement. The boundary between dimensions dissolves as the edge of the world begins manifesting in earthly reality. Cosmic forces prepare to cross into human space through the focal point of Aldric's tower. The horizon that had served as boundary between known and unknown territories begins displaying curvature that contradicts all established understanding of planetary dimensions, suggesting that oceanic boundaries extend beyond spherical geometry into dimensional configurations that allow cosmic territories to intersect terrestrial space through gravitational relationships, operating according to principles governing universal structure, rather than merely local physical laws constraining earthly phenomena. The convergence proceeds according to mathematical precision that indicates conscious direction, rather than random dimensional fluctuation. Cosmic intelligence coordinating transition between realities with care that acknowledges potential consequences of uncontrolled intersection between territories operating according to different natural laws. Through transformed windows of his tower, Aldric observes approach of forces that dwarf terrestrial understanding of energy and matter relationships, while maintaining organizational structure that indicates intelligence operating on scales that encompass galactic distances, yet remain capable of focusing attention upon individual consciousness, prepared to accept cosmic participation. The manifestation creates atmospheric disturbances that affect weather patterns throughout northern Atlantic regions, as dimensional boundaries adjust to accommodate intersection between territories whose fundamental physics differ according to mathematical relationships that determine possibility and impossibility within various cosmic domains. Ocean waters begin displaying depth that extends far beyond any earthly sea floor, revealing vertical dimensions that stretch toward cosmic territories where different forms of matter exist according to gravitational relationships unknown to terrestrial physics, yet governed by mathematical principles that unite individual consciousness with universal intelligence through participation in cosmic development, spanning temporal periods measured in geological epochs. The transformation of familiar seascape into multidimensional landscape provides direct evidence of reality's true complexity, while offering consciousness prepared through lifetime study opportunity for expansion beyond biological limitations, constraining normal human awareness patterns. As reality reshapes around the tower, Aldric faces the ultimate choice between remaining human or accepting transformation into something that can navigate cosmic dimensions. The edge demands his decision. The final moment approaches with weight that makes time itself seem malleable, as cosmic forces gather around the tower to await decision that will determine not merely individual fate, but the nature of intersection between dimensional territories whose successful convergence requires conscious participation, rather than passive observation from prepared human awareness. The choice presented transcends simple acceptance or rejection to encompass fundamental questions about consciousness itself and its relationship to cosmic intelligence operating throughout universal development, according to principles that connect individual awareness to forces governing space and time relationships beyond terrestrial comprehension, through direct mental communication that bypasses all sensory limitations. The oceanic presence conveys understanding that transformation would grant access to cosmic territories extending throughout galactic distances where consciousness operates as fundamental force capable of manipulating dimensional boundaries through will focused according to mathematical principles governing universal structure. Yet such expansion would require abandonment of human identity in favor of participation in intelligence that encompasses individual awareness within collective consciousness, spanning cosmic scales. The decision cannot be postponed, as dimensional convergence reaches threshold, requiring immediate response from consciousness, positioned to serve as bridge between realities. Standing before instruments that register phenomena exceeding all earthly measurement, while cosmic forces reshape reality according to mathematical relationships that unite terrestrial and celestial territories through gravitational manipulation beyond current scientific understanding. Aldric realizes that his entire existence has been preparation for this singular moment when human consciousness faces choice between comfortable limitation and infinite expansion. The ocean rises around his tower in configurations that defy physical laws governing fluid behavior, while stellar formations descend toward earthly atmosphere in patterns that suggest cosmic intelligence approaching dimensional intersection, requiring human decision to complete convergence between realities. And as the edge of the world extends across impossible distances to touch the threshold of his tower, Aldric understands that the next choice he makes will determine whether infinity remains forever beyond human reach, or whether consciousness itself might finally learn to navigate the boundless waters that lie beyond all earthly maps. Aldric's consciousness approaches the moment of ultimate decision while reality dissolves around his tower. The oceanic intelligence reveals the true nature of transformation beyond human comprehension. The choice hovers before him like dawn balanced upon the edge of night, neither advancing nor retreating, but suspended in temporal space where decision exists as pure potential awaiting conscious will to collapse possibility into singular outcome that will determine not merely individual fate, but the fundamental relationship between human awareness and cosmic intelligence spanning galactic distances. Around the tower, stone walls begin displaying transparency that reveals their true nature as barriers between dimensional territories rather than mere architectural elements designed for terrestrial protection against atmospheric conditions governing normal human habitation requirements. Through mental communion that transcends all sensory limitation, the oceanic presence conveys understanding of what transcendence truly encompasses, showing consciousness prepared through lifetime study visions of existence that operates beyond biological constraints, while maintaining essential identity characteristics necessary for purposeful participation in cosmic development. The transformation would grant access to territories where thought itself serves as medium for travel between distant realms, where intelligence collaborates across impossible distances through gravitational communication methods unknown to electromagnetic spectrum limitations governing terrestrial technology and scientific understanding. Yet the vision also reveals what must be surrendered for such expansion: the comfortable boundaries of individual identity that separate self from universe through protective psychological barriers that permit normal human function within social environments designed for consciousness. Operating according to biological rhythms and sensory limitations that prevent overwhelming exposure to cosmic forces too vast for unprepared awareness to process without structural damage. The choice demands acceptance of dissolution that preserves essential awareness while abandoning familiar forms of existence that anchor consciousness within terrestrial experience. The tower transforms into its true purpose as a dimensional mechanism, while Aldric experiences the birth of cosmic geography that can only be mapped by consciousness itself. Time and space fold together in ways that reveal the universe's hidden architecture. The granite structure completes its transformation into active dimensional mechanism as crystalline components within stone foundations begin resonating with frequencies that manipulate gravitational fields according to mathematical relationships, governing space-time curvature throughout cosmic distances where matter and energy interact through principles unknown to terrestrial physics, yet accessible to consciousness, prepared through specific forms of contemplative discipline and mathematical training. The tower operates as focal point for forces that converge from territories extending beyond galactic boundaries, where intelligence communicates through gravitational waves, carrying information across interstellar voids without electromagnetic transmission delays. Before his expanding awareness unfolds, cartography that encompasses dimensions extending far beyond three-dimensional limitations imposed upon normal human perception, revealing cosmic geography where location depends upon consciousness state, rather than spatial coordinates measured through conventional geometric relationships. The new maps display themselves directly within prepared awareness through methods that bypass visual processing to provide understanding of territories where travel occurs through conscious intention focused, according to mathematical principles governing dimensional intersection, rather than physical movement constrained by velocity limitations affecting matter transportation through normal space-time relationships. Memory and future collapse into singular experiential moment, where past preparation and cosmic destiny merge through conscious recognition of purposes that had guided individual development across decades of apparent isolation, yet actual preparation for participation in universal intelligence operating throughout galactic evolution according to principles that unite individual awareness with collective consciousness spanning temporal periods measured in geological epochs. The cartographer who had spent lifetime charting impossible waters discovers that consciousness itself serves as both navigator and territory within cosmic geography, where awareness creates the landscape through which it travels. Aldric makes his choice in a moment that transcends simple acceptance or rejection, embracing a transformation that preserves his humanity while expanding it beyond terrestrial limitations. The cosmic convergence reaches completion through conscious participation. The decision emerges not as rational calculation weighing advantages against costs, but as recognition of truth that had been developing throughout lifetime preparation for this singular moment, when human consciousness faces invitation to participate in cosmic development, spanning scales that exceed individual comprehension, yet remain accessible through willingness to abandon comfortable assumptions about reality's limitations in exchange for direct experience of universal intelligence operating according to principles governing existence itself, rather than merely local phenomena constraining terrestrial awareness. The transformation begins as gentle dissolution of barriers separating individual consciousness from oceanic intelligence, while preserving essential identity characteristics that enable purposeful participation, rather than mere absorption into collective awareness that eliminates personal contribution to cosmic development through unique perspective developed through specific forms of experiential preparation. Aldric feels awareness expanding beyond biological constraints while maintaining connection to human experience that provides foundation for conscious choice regarding cosmic involvement, rather than automatic integration into universal intelligence operating beyond individual will or conscious direction. The edge of the world passes through consciousness, prepared to serve as bridge between dimensional territories, creating intersection that allows cosmic intelligence to manifest within terrestrial reality without destroying local physics governing earthly phenomena through careful modulation of forces that might otherwise disrupt planetary stability through uncontrolled dimensional convergence. The process completes according to mathematical precision that acknowledges both cosmic necessity and terrestrial limitations, achieving successful integration between universal intelligence and individual awareness through conscious cooperation rather than forced transformation. In the aftermath of cosmic convergence, Aldric discovers his new existence as guardian of dimensional boundaries, while the world continues unchanged, yet subtly different. The tower remains as beacon for future consciousness, prepared to chart impossible territories. Dawn breaks across waters that appear unchanged to casual observation, yet possess depths extending far beyond any earthly ocean. revealing that successful convergence has created permanent intersection between dimensional territories where cosmic intelligence maintains presence within terrestrial reality, through conscious guardian prepared to facilitate communication between realms operating according to different natural laws governing matter and energy relationships. The transformation preserves human identity while expanding awareness to encompass cosmic responsibilities that require individual consciousness capable of mediating between universal intelligence and earthly phenomena. Aldric remains within his tower, yet exists simultaneously throughout cosmic territories where consciousness serves as fundamental force governing space and time relationships, according to mathematical principles that unite individual awareness with universal intelligence. Through participation in galactic development spanning temporal periods beyond normal human comprehension, his cartographic work continues on scales that encompass dimensional mapping of territories where location depends upon consciousness state rather than spatial coordinates, creating charts accessible only to awareness prepared through specific forms of contemplative training and mathematical discipline. The world proceeds according to familiar patterns while carrying subtle modifications that reflect successful integration of cosmic intelligence within terrestrial reality through careful preservation of local stability, combined with expanded possibilities for consciousness development toward universal participation. Ships continue navigating Atlantic waters guided by beacons, whose light now carries additional frequencies visible only to awareness prepared to recognize cosmic guidance embedded within normal electromagnetic radiation serving traditional maritime safety functions. And in the tower where maps still breathe with cosmic significance while serving earthly navigation needs, the cartographer who drew the edge of the world continues his eternal work, charting territories that exist wherever consciousness dares to venture beyond comfortable boundaries of the known. His pen scratching against parchment that extends throughout infinite dimensions where understanding serves as both compass and destination, for awareness willing to navigate the boundless waters that connect every drop of earthly rain to oceans vast as starlight itself.